One of the most widely used hot sauces on the planet is Sriracha. It originated in a Thai seaside town and spread throughout Southeast Asia as a common household item. Before being forced to leave his home because he was an unwanted minority, a man by the name of David Tran experimented with the recipe. When no other nation would take them in, he was placed in America after being marooned at sea for a month. He made an attempt to sell his own recipe. Jinsuatim Krajang, a businessman from the seaside Thai town of Sriracha, visited Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. He found that each nation had its own sweet, salty, and sour sauces, but nothing that combined them all. When he got back home, he made the decision to create his own that would be suitable for any dish and would please the Thai palate. A hot sauce made of brick peppers, garlic vinegar, sugar, and sea salt was the end result. To ensure that the flavors blended together perfectly, it took weeks, and sometimes months, to prepare. The other GSA insisted on peeling and pickling the garlic, using only perfectly red peppers, and boiling large chunks of salt. He then allowed the mixture to dry in the sun before fermenting it in barrels. Later, Thaman, his daughter, used his recipes to make a seafood cocktail sauce. Her friends loved it, and they urged her to sell it. They advised her to call it Sriracha, so she did. Since her family wanted to share the recipe, and the ingredients weren't a secret, she didn't bother to patent it. In Thailand, Sriracha porridge quickly gained popularity, inspiring others to start producing their own. Over time, various brands spread throughout Southeast Asia, including Vietnam. She had no idea that her father's recipe would be exported to the United States. But first, the creator of a new brand would have to make it through being marooned at sea. David Tran, who was 30 years old at the time, converted the majority of his life savings into gold. He needed the money to start a new life under the new communist government because he and his family were no longer welcome in Vietnam. They were considered to be untrustworthy minorities. They had lived in Vietnam for many years, but they were not of Vietnamese descent. Like other members of their community, they belonged to a southern Chinese ethnic group. In search of better opportunities, they migrated from their homes during the famine to neighboring nations. They labored arduously to establish a new life, and a means of subsistence after arriving in Saigon. Even better, they were able to purchase just enough land to engage in a little farming. For David, the small plot of land represented a huge opportunity to launch a new company that would grow and sell fresh chili peppers. Sadly, he was unable to turn a profit. David didn't give up on his new business despite the fact that there was too much competition and he couldn't even cover the cost of labor. He decides to make a hot sauce instead, using preservatives like vinegar, salt, garlic, soybean oil, and chili peppers. Later on, he referred to it as pepper tea. He and his family bicycled to local markets to sell the sauce after bottling it in repurposed baby food jars. The payoff from the pivot wasn't really worth it. Vietnam acknowledged that Chinese troops are advancing, according to a radio broadcast from Hanoi tonight, as ties between China and Vietnam deteriorate. David and his family were under government pressure to leave Vietnam. Additionally, they were instructed to surrender their house and belongings and pay their exit fee. David was able to secure the necessary funds to board the fictitious, decaying ship with his family. Although the ship could hold 1,500 people, David and his family were crammed in with 3,000 other people. They had little hope for the future and had no idea that it was the beginning of the creation of an empire. The Hui Fong's captain secretly anchored the ship off the coast of Hong Kong after 5 days at sea. He claimed that his passengers were refugees from shipwrecks. People were saved by him off the Vietnamese coast. Since Hong Kong was not the British authorities' first port of call and they were already dealing with a refugee problem, they were suspicious and refused entry. 100,000 refugees were arriving from Vietnam at the time, placing a strain on Hong Kong's housing stock and social welfare initiatives. David and his family spent Christmas and the first few days of the new year stranded on the beach. They weren't granted temporary asylum until the UN High Commissioner for Refugees stepped in. They were sent to Boston, along with many other refugees. David started to miss home. He had a hard time adjusting to the harsh winters or locating fresh chili peppers. After learning that chili pepper grown in California, he immediately relocated his family to Los Angeles. He settled in and then went to Chinatown to buy some imported hot sauce. He considered making his own pepper sauce again because he was so disappointed in the flavor. He knew it was the right choice after taking a quick glance at the grocery store shelves. When compared to Vietnam, the market was very different, and prepared foods were more popular. David had no strategy in place when he began. Instead, he simply purchased fresh chili peppers and manually blended his pepper sauce. He then sold it door to door while operating out of a Chevy van. In his first month, he earned a few $1,000s. And he continued to sell more as the months passed. He eventually came to the conclusion that he needed to purchase more chilies and a larger area. He requested a loan from his bank, but they declined it. He was forced to use his family's savings as a result. It was an awful risk. After putting everything in the queue, I was unaware of the size of the market. David had a good beginning. In Chinatown, he discovered a small store with a low rent that he could use to grow his business later. In order to never forget his journey to the US, he gave his business the name Hui Fang. He chose his zodiac sign, a rooster, for his company's logo, and he chose green caps for his packaging to represent the green stem of a fresh chili pepper to scale production. He invested a lot of money in new machines, but it was a waste because he lacked engineering experience and they weren't very efficient. He taught himself how to weld joints and cut metal in order to alter them. Thankfully, it worked, and he was able to try out new products. A second influx of Vietnamese refugees was arriving in Los Angeles at the time. David then considered coming up with a hot sauce that they could all enjoy. He later understood that it would be better to create something that everyone could enjoy because the 1984 Summer Olympics were drawing near. When I first saw Heinz 57 ketchup, I assumed the 1984 Summer Olympics were approaching. Fresh chili peppers, garlic vinegar, sugar, and salt were used to make David's brand new hot sauce. Despite being based on the well-known Sriracha pan recipe. In homage to the original, David used fresh peppers rather than sun-dried ones and gave the dish the name of the seaside town where it was first created. He attempted to sell it to his suppliers, but they rejected him. "It's too spicy," they said. Others besides them also had doubts about him. Even his friends advised him to add more sugar or a tomato base. "Must be hot for hot sauce. If you don't like it hot, use less," David insisted. "Mayonnaise is not produced here." Soon after David decided to leave his new hot sauce alone, it started to appear in dim sum restaurants and noodle shops. Owners would place full bottles on tables because doing so was inexpensive, and facilitated customer interaction. It had to cost more for people to use and remember the brand. According to David, they probably would have served it in side dishes to conserve food. A dream came true, truly. Making a rich man's sauce at a poor man's price was his aim. That way, even though he never hired a sales team or advertised, everyone can take pleasure in it. Consumers searched for Sriracha in supermarkets, and large chain restaurants added the sauce to their menus. David was selling 10 million bottles of Sriracha annually by 2009, and Bon Appetit magazine named it the ingredient of the year the following year. His Sriracha gained a cult following over time that he had never seen for a simple condiment. Despite now having 3 products, it is still a family-run business empire that will not disband. Their most popular sauce continues to be Sriracha. In interviews, David frequently claims that his hard-working family and staff are the reason why he is successful. Additionally, he offers important guidance for those looking to launch their own business. This is the story of how a Chinese Vietnamese refugee created one of the most well-known hot sauces in the world using a Thai recipe. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content like this. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload from us. And if you have any suggestions for future videos or topics you'd like us to cover, please leave them in the comments below.